We've seen some of Python's inbuilt functions before. Today we're going to be looking at how to make our own. One of the functions we've seen quite recently is len. So if we were to have a value, let's just call it x for now, and maybe give it the value hello. What we can do is we can print the length of x to the terminal, and we run the program, we'll get 5 because we've got 5 letters in this string, or 5 characters in this string. We can also use a list, so we could have 1, 2, 54, 72, and 1. And we run this program again, we get 5 again because we've got 5 items in this list. Now what the len function is doing is we are calling a few different lines of code, because we already know how we can do this without using len. We could say length equals 0, and then for I in x, length plus equals 1, and then the value of length, if we were to print this out as well, will be the same, be 5. And this works with our string as well. Like that. So this is quite a simple function, but all of this information here is hidden away from us, because when we're looking for the length of x, we don't really need to worry about this much, and we certainly don't want to do it every time we use the len function. So what we can do is we can hide this away in our own function. So we're going to create our own version shortly. What we want to be able to do is, in the same way that we can print the length of hello, like this, we want to also be able to print my underscore len. We want to create our own length function, and we want to be able to pass in the same string, and we want to get the same value of 5 here. So if I take out these comments here, this is what we're going to be starting with, because this is the code that allows us to find the length of a value. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to define my len. So def my len. And then we're going to want brackets. And because we need a value inside of it, we need to give that value a variable name to hold it. So here I've called it value, because we can use this later on in the function. And so what this means is, if you just ignore lines 3 through 5 for now, is we are calling the function and we are setting the value of the variable called value to hello. And if we were to come underneath and print my len of 1, 2, 3, in this case we are setting the value of the variable called value to the list 1, 2, 3. So it works either way. So what we're going to need after the definition is a colon, and then that means we need to indent all of these lines. I've done that with control close square bracket. And there's one thing we're missing from here. So what this means is we can call mylen, and we will do these 3 lines of code, but we're missing something. Print needs a value, or in other words, if we were to do x equals len hello, we could print x, because we want the value that comes back from len. But at the moment we're not getting a value back from len, from my len. And so what we need to do is we need to return the value of length. And so let's try this out. Take that and put it back to there. Take that out. And let's run the 2. And we've got what we want. But what would happen if we were to forget this return statement? You see there's no error. It doesn't give us an error right now. If we were to run it, we get the value none. And this isn't what we want. It doesn't throw us an error because it might not be an error. We can have a function that calls several different lines of code that we don't need a value from. The only reason it's an error is because we are using the return value. A bit like this. If, say, we had, let's make a new function called print menu, and we want to, let's say, option 1 is start game. Option 2 is going to be options. And option 3 is quit. If we were to have this function, we wouldn't need to get a return value. We could just print menu like this. And then that wouldn't be an issue. We wouldn't get a value back. We wouldn't be printing anything out. We are just doing these 3 lines of code. And what this means is that if we want to print the menu in multiple areas of the program, we don't have to repeat these 3 lines. We can just call this one. And that also means if we want to change it, we don't have to change it in multiple places. We just change it up here. One of the cool things functions can also do for us is hide these values away from us. So if we wanted to print the value of this variable that we're creating here, you can see straight away VS Code is telling us that length is not defined, but we've defined it here, right? Let's just run it anyway and see what happens. And Python is telling us outright that name is not defined. This is because it is only defined within the function. We are creating what's called a local scope. So we are opening the function. We are creating a value inside of it. And when we finish the function, we are closing that. We are getting rid of all of our variables that we had before. And so, as well, we can't access value directly, because that doesn't exist either. We have it as a parameter, as a value that we take into our function. When the function's over, it's gone. This also means we can reuse these variable names in other functions, or even in our whole program. Down here, we get the length from here, because we open up the mylen scope and we close it down after we set it to 5. Have it go to 5 at least, count up to 5 because our value has 5 characters in it. And then we have another function with the value 0 and length goes to 5. We return the length, which is 5. We print out. And then when we come to this one, we are going to the length that is in this scope. And so we go to this one. And so what if we wanted a function with multiple parameters? For example, let's have define the function add, where we want num1 and num2. And this is how we do it. We just separate them by a comma. And then we add a colon to say that this is a function. or that we want an indented block afterwards, and we just return num1 plus num2, like that. But we also need to spell return correctly. And so now, if we go underneath this, we can print add, and let's do 5 and 10. And we separate these two by a comma as well. And we get 15. Now, we should also be able to do something with strings. So, hello space plus world. This is a bit of a strange use, but because we haven't set the type strictly or statically on these two variables, and because we can add two strings together with the plus operator, this still does work. Functions are extremely important in programming. They allow you to split up your programs into small areas so that you can more easily understand what you're doing. This is still a small example of a program, but it does show how we can break things down a little bit, and also how we can avoid repeating the same thing over and over again. So we've defined a function called program, and this has just 3 lines. And what we are doing is we are setting the value of the variable num1 to a number. And over here we could have something a bit more complex. So for example, we could check to make sure that the input is definitely an integer before we give it back. And if it's not, then we could ask for another integer so that we can make sure that we only return an integer. Down here we are calling the same thing. So again, if we wanted to do that check, we wouldn't have to do it twice down here. We would only have to do it once and then call a function. And then we can call, here it's just an add function, but maybe what we actually want to do with these two numbers is more complex, and so we can pass it into another part of the program so that we can understand it step by step. We can decompose the program. We can break down a problem into smaller areas and solve the little areas one at a time. That's all for this video. Next video we will be talking about files.